Good morning. Um, Getting a little bit earlier start today. So what I've been working on, and I've been kind of, you might have noticed that if you've been watching any of my previous streams in the last week or so, I've been drifting. One thing pulls me into another thing, pulls me into another thing, pulls me into another thing, and what it is I'm finding that some of those things that I've been avoiding doing are starting to have a tie-in or a connection to the task I'm working on. So I say, all right, let's go kind of get that in, and let's get that in, and let's get that in. So now what's resulted in me happening is now I got all my services up. Now and certain functions to make those services compile need to kind of be in place, or I need to remove certain code that's no longer relevant. So when I first pulled the simulator code from the front end, I just basically had AI convert what I had written in React into Go, so that I was thinking, well, I'll activate the simulator, the POC from the back end and start implementing that in the front end. But it's come to the point where I'm like, screw that, man. I have no interest in writing my POC again and trying to make the POC work in the back end. I've done the POC. That doesn't mean anything anymore. That's like, okay, well, the concept is good. I can do it. I know it's functional. I can do some pretty cool things. The POC is a lot to prove to myself what's there, what's possible. And now I'm like, okay, it's there. It's possible. It's possible being within my realm of, can I figure this out? Of course it's possible. I've seen other people do similar things, maybe not the same, but similar. And various stages of that, I think I can do more than I've seen online, but I think that those things exist. I'm starting to get enough familiarity with the scope of work and the tools that are available and what they can do, and I'm like, yes, it's there. So, as a result, I've been saying, well, let's get all my services to compile with their code in place, and then I can start working on the UI a little bit more and start getting some pieces plugged in, which a lot of that was getting the simulator kind of working in front, at least getting it to start, and also to start putting in some data. A lot of what I was going to do in this stream was build data, which is build game plans and plays so that I can start functioning. But I thought, well, those things aren't going to have any use to me if I don't have the coach making the call from the simulator using the playbook. And so I built that stuff in, and that's how I ended up building all of my other parts, because I said, well, in order for this to happen, I'm going to need the leagues and the players, because the teams are being stored. And I mean, just the way everything tied together, every service had its part to play in each action. And said, well, I got to build the basis so that those things can do it, and I can put things where they belong. Well, now I'm kind of in here going, well, now I've got these things, got the route actions, and I need to flesh a lot of this stuff out so that when I'm building the data, I'm building good data. And even now, I've already determined one little change needs to happen in the way I save my plays. Right now, my plays are saving a single thing. They'd save the route or the action, but I'm like, yeah, but I think I need to know sometimes what the action is, and I don't want to just say, okay, well, if it's a coordinate, then it's a move, because that's not necessarily true. It could be a motion, which is not a normal move. A motion happens before the play. A move happens after the play. Yes, they're both moves technically, but this is so that I can give the system a way to know when to move these characters, right? So, so we have the first thing that happens is we have to call the. It brought into my mind that how I'm going to call the actions of each player means I need to have everything in the route, including the starter position, which I wasn't putting in. So it's another thing I got to add to the play creation. So again, it's like, well, I need to hash this stuff out a little bit so that when I'm creating data, it's going to be valid and usable in the app. So as I go in deeper into how the run play is going to function, I realized, well, it's going to be a lot easier to have a starting point. So all the execute route step functionality has to do is call in sequence every action that every player has to do. So they calls the first action. Once they all succeed at the first action, which should be line up, they're going to move into their positions. And when I was working with Claude and Gemini yesterday, I personally probably did not have a full scope of what I was trying to accomplish or what was going to be required. So as I asked it things to do, I'd realized that it was doing this thing. I was like, yeah, okay, but it's not considering this or that. And then, but it's me hashing out what those things are. So a lot of what I'm doing, yes, it's true that if I was to do a complete and total design by way of what the norm is in the world, I'm probably not doing what most companies would recommend. In fact, they probably wouldn't like what I'm doing. Sadly, I'm trying to get a job, so don't. Hey, if you're out there looking for a programmer who can figure stuff out, I'm your guy. Please don't pay attention to I can follow your standards of design first and build later, but the way I'm going about this is I'm trying to, along with the AI, I'm unscrambling what the AI is doing and solving certain problems that way. So I'm kind of design developing simultaneously. Not always the best. But this is partly an issue of, okay, so this is what I run into even when I was, somebody parking outside in front of my house. I keep looking, going on, what's going on? So sorry about looking outside. What I run into, even when I used to work in a company that used Agile, like I'm trying to do, you'd get these things. And if you knew the small pieces, if you know anything about Agile, you'd rank them in their complexity. So you'd have anything from a 1, which is like, put in a piece of text, edit some visual thing that's super tiny. You're probably not going to run into issues. If you could probably take 10 to 15 ones in a sprint, because they're so easy. It's like, change this text, change that text, do this little thing, that little thing, and it just fix a bunch of things, and they're going to go off without a hitch, most likely, because there's no real functionality in them. A 2, similar, but maybe you have to change a bunch of text, or maybe you have to fix a boolean is backwards, many small fixes, things that aren't, you know exactly what needs to be done, but they take a little bit more work, maybe a little bit more testing to validate, but they're small. And you could probably take 6, 7 2s, which is, again, getting you up to around 14 points, which is a lot. And in my visual or appearance, or my opinion, 8 is the max you should generally take for a sprint. You can take more later, but if you start getting into 3s, though, now a 3 might be an easy-ish fix, but there might be a little unknown in there. There's some, you might have to write a quick function that does a simple task, but you may not fully scope out what it ties into. So this is where your design work gets into play, right? So if you have a good design, you can say, oh, well, this needs to touch this and this and this. It's pretty basic, but you're building up a few things. But in order for it to function, you're going to have to do some create some unit tests and some compiling, and it's things that aren't going to be a simple fix, right? You don't even have the unit tests and the parts for it. It's a little bit more complex, simple-ish, but it's more. So you don't have to create necessarily a unit test if you already have them for a 1 or a 2, because those things are going to be minor, and those things may not even have they may already have unit tests in place to capture those issues. They may already have, obviously the Boolean reversed idea, but I'm just saying it might be kind of things that your unit tests, maybe you just have to add a condition in there, test for this as well, a little thing that's not a new test so much as an addition to your test to make it get the right answer. Maybe before you weren't testing that particular test because you thought the Boolean, you missed something in your test, so you just add it to make the test correct. But simple things. A 3 might be a little bit more new, more so. Then you go up to, then after that, you're getting more complex, and this is what do they call it? A Fibonacci scale. So you go up to 5. Now 5, the unknowns become great. Now with threes, you probably don't want to take 5 threes. It's probably a 15 is going to be too much. You might be able to take 3 threes and be good. You'll be around 9 points. 12 is pushing it if you take 4, because again, there's enough stuff there that it may require more time than you expect. It may require more. Maybe the time to write it is longer. It's still easy, but okay, you may have underestimated how many lines of code or whatever to do it. So a Fibonacci there is going to be a little bit more. And then when you get to a 5, the complexity becomes a little bit more, and you might have more unknowns, and it starts to get into that point where your design may be very good at telling you exactly what you want, but not giving you the exact set of code. Maybe you don't have a technical design, which goes into the actual, hey, we need to write this function and put a stub in this other file, and you need to create a gRPC call, and you need to implement the call on the front end. It might be pretty basic, but it's got a lot of things it touches, and you got to create unit tests. Taking 2 5s can be risky because they're pretty big. They take a lot more stuff. Then you start getting into things like an 8. An 8 is your entire sprint. You shouldn't take more than 1. And you might not get it done. You might get it done. Maybe it's not as hard as you think, but it's going to touch a lot of things, and the full design. I think it's hard to have a complete and solid design for an 8 personally. You might have a lot of good information, but I've run into my experience has been that an 8 is never as hashed out as you think it is. You get in there and you're like, oh, but this wasn't considered. Oh, but that wasn't considered. And 8s get to blow up. Now maybe you're good enough, or you know enough that you can get it done, but it's a solid sprint, full 2 weeks to do an 8. If you get it done early, great, but